Why is Shank called a rat? What is this meme? I don't understand it. I need someone to explain it to me. So the answer to that question is surprisingly complicated, because Shanks is a fictional pirate who has been put on public trial now for the last 28 years of real-world publishing time, and it's only in the last few months that this trial has concluded. And you might think that you know this story, but mate, this goes all of the way back to 1997, and according to my YouTube statistics, almost 30% of you watching weren't even born back then. So let me tell you the story of the oldest theory and the oldest accusation in One Piece. When One Piece first began, mangaka Eiichiro Oda was a lot more brutal and, how shall we say, morally grey than what he evolved into in the present day. And in fact, in chapter 1, he goes to some pretty great lengths to ensure that our protagonists are not seen as typical good guys, or even, depending on your perspective, good guys at all. Particularly with Ben Beckman's famous line, "You're not dealing with saints here. We're pirates and we don't play by the rules," which came right after Lucky Roo shot and killed a bandit in the head, which immediately sets a stage worthy of a piratesome story. And Shanks isn't portrayed as your standard good guy shonen mentor, as even the glare of Conqueror's Haki at the Lord of the Coast shows that Shanks has a much harsher side to him, yes. So whilst chapter 1 did give us an overall very warm impression of Shanks, the commentary on pirate-based morality is something that stayed with the fanbase. Now unfortunately, we have no record of what discussion was like at the time, because the internet did not exist when chapter 1 was published in 1997. I mean, yes, it did exist, but it was more of a novelty. A better comparison might be that Google didn't even exist in 1997. Google, the company that owns YouTube, the thing it is that you're watching and pays me every month. One Piece is older than Google. But ever since I first started reading the One Piece in the mid-2000s, one theory has consistently popped up, which is that Goldie Roger didn't miraculously develop some incurable condition, and he was in fact poisoned. Almost turning a lot of the first decade of One Piece discussion into something of a murder mystery. There were all kinds of fun suspects. Buggy was one to call on due to him being an established antagonist, and before we met Dark King, Silver's Rayleigh, the first mate was also put forward as a potential murderer, as well as the even more unknown at the time Scopogaban. But there was one character who took more focus than any other, and that was Mr. Shanks. And this Shanks poison theory can be summed up by the following Reddit post. "I wouldn't be surprised if he poisoned Roger. That's why he's sick. He's a rat. Maybe he also poisoned Luffy's orange juice. I mean, he did poison his mind to be a pirate instead of a good marine." In the beginning, this idea had no evidence whatsoever, and as a result was mostly dismissed, as it should be. However, there would go on to be a few key moments in One Piece where this idea looked not totally entirely ridiculous. And of the more recent of those points, this theory did pick up a mild amount of steam after J. Garcia Saturn was revealed to be the warrior god of science and defense and had a hobby of creating diseases in his spare time. The idea here being that Saturn created a one-of-a-kind condition for Roger to be afflicted with, and he used Shanks to deliver it. And from here, men on the internet did what men on the internet do to a roughly adequate standard, which was to scour the entire One Piece manga for evidence of this, and a very, very disturbing trend was discovered. A trend of Shanks offering people drinks. Poisoned drinks. In chapter 1, Shanks tried to poison Higama the bear by giving him the only bottle in Makino's bar that was left conveniently unconsumed, likely because of all of the poison inside of it. And following the Eni Slobby incident, Shanks decided to meet Whitebeard personally, bringing with him his greatest of weapons, a giant bottle of poison that Shanks claims as a, quote, "wine from my hometown." And when Ace set out to sea on his grand adventure, he made a special detour to thank Shanks for saving Luffy's life, and this is the infamous scene where there is a continuity error, as Shanks has apparently regrown his left arm. That is what Shanks wants you to think. He wanted you to focus on the left arm that shouldn't be there to distract you from the right arm, holding a big old cup of poison that Ace proceeds to drink. And look, this could all be coincidence, but Higama, dead. Whitebeard, dead. And Ace, oh, very dead. So even if Shanks wasn't using poison, there could be a Sanji lighter curse at play here, which, if you don't know, anyone who ends up lighting a cigarette for Sanji ends up dying, which would be Pedro and also Ace. Oh, you got double cursed. So you just remember smoking kills, but in the One Piece universe, it kills everyone except for the smoker themselves. And that's not all, because according to drink theory, Shanks is currently working on 2 more victims. As in chapter 96, Mihawk brings there's news of Luffy's first bounty, and what does Shanks do? He forces Mihawk to have a drink. And following the raid on Onigashima, Shanks graciously hosts Marco and pumps him full of cursed liquids as well. Both of them, according to drink theory, will be dead by the end of One Piece, which is, it might be possible. But not just them, no, another one. Oddly enough, as recently as chapter 1126, Oda has created a minor chemical reaction within the mind-brains of poison proponents, where the red hair pirates arrive to deliver scarlet justice to the Bato Club, and what is this? Ship Dr. Hongo, what are you doing with a vial of poison? And why were you ordering Bartolomeo to feed it to Luffy? Could this be the fabled poison that Shanks used to take the life of Roger, slowly mixing it into his daily rations of sake and Higashi's a mistake? Probably not, because the poison didn't have any effect on Bartolomeo. It was just used as a test to see how loyal he was to Luffy. Or was it? Because here is the thing, right? Bato did get poisoned. It's a slow-acting poison. The same poison Shanks has been feeding Roger as a kid, and the same poison that Rat gave to Whitebeard. Bato got hit with the Deadbeat Devastator, which refers to Yasopp destroying his ship because he's a deadbeat dad, because he was going to get ill and know too much. Little does Shank know that Bato has a barrier bubbled and escaped alive. He's going to make his way to Luffy dying slowly in the process and revealing the truth. Them sinking Bato makes no sense. This has to be some arbitrary plot device. So that was the main thought that spawned from this chapter, and the top response to that thought was, he also gave the poison to Goku so the future androids can kill everyone, which is a good summary of how seriously this idea was taken. Not very. But the point is that Shanks' suspicion has been around since literally day one, and also day whatever this one is. And in fact, this evil Shanks may indeed be the oldest theory in all of One Piece. And as the series went on, fans were always actively looking for the next sinister scrap of evidence to prove it. And one such scrap was found during Water 7 when Monkey D. Patriarch said to Luffy, "Do you even have the slightest idea what kind of pirate your redhead friend is?" Which are words not so easily dismissed. Yes, Garp has a vendetta against Shanks for corrupting his grandson, but he generally has quite a finely tuned moral compass. And here Garp is hinting that there is a side of Shanks that Luffy hasn't seen. Because that's not the kind of thing that I could see Garp saying about Roger, who Garp greatly respected. Then came Shanks intercepting Kaido in the New World before he could get to Marineford, preventing Kaido from joining the fight, which would have led to the complete destruction of the world government. At any point in history, the world government have never had enough power to take on two emperors at once, which, as expected, has led to the accusation that Shanks was a world government agent, and he had been sent specifically to block Kaido so that the world government could safely deal with Whitebeard. Although the reality was probably the exact opposite. Shanks stopped Kaido to help Whitebeard because Kaido wanted to kill Whitebeard, not attack the world government. But look, facts have never been a force powerful enough to stop this here theory as we continue. As Shanks then took a rather long break from One Piece, 248 chapters to be precise, and in fact, this is absolutely wild, but Shanks' first post-time skip appearance in the manga was during Whole Cake Island in the From the Decks of the World cover story. He was gone for 6 whole years, and we see him so much now in the modern day that we don't really appreciate just how long he was gone for. But that absence did not stop him from being accused of nefarious deeds. In fact, his continuous absence only further fueled the flames of suspicion. During Fishman Island, Madame Charlie made the infamous prediction that Luffy would destroy said Fishman Island, and very, very importantly, in the manga, Luffy's face is never shown with this prediction. It's just a silhouette of a man wearing a straw hat, and knowing that our protagonist would never do such an evil with all of the fire and everything, the thought became that this could be, in fact, Shanks, and that after Luffy returned the straw hat, Shanks would finally come out of the closet as evil and destroy Fishman Island. I wouldn't go so far as to call this a good theory, even at the time, and in fact, for much of its lifespan, the evidence for this idea has been pretty flimsy at best. And almost every iteration of the evil Shanks idea can be summed up by a Reddit post made 7 years ago now that starts with, "Yo guys, I recently came up with the idea of Shanks being the one who diseased Gold Roger when he was, quote, just a cabin boy. I don't know, it came up my head. Share what you think about this." I think not good things if it came up your head, but there's also this other thread which opens the evil Shanks theory with, "I don't have much to say, it's mostly that I love the concept of it." That is exactly what sustained evil Shanks for more than 2 decades. The idea that it it might be cool, maybe. That and the odd panel of Shanks looking rather ominous like this one from chapter 903, where he says he'll be meeting Luffy soon, whilst admittedly looking a little bit like a serial killer. But laugh all you want at these brave theorists on the internet, but at one point in time, things did get quite serious for Evil Shanks, and it was only a handful of chapters after that panel. Up until this point, every Evil Shanks theory boiled down to maybe it's true, and if so, I would like that. But seeing a Shanks-like figure meeting the Five Elder Stars in chapter 907 changed everything, and it turned even the most hearty of Shanks supporters into questioning of his intentions. The Elder Stars being so casual with Shanks was always so incredibly suspicious due to the fact that he was one of the major enemies of the world government. He was a Yonko, a Four Emperor. I mean, just imagine if any other Emperor of the Sea had strolled into this room. Big Mom, Kaido, Blackbeard, Whitebeard? Are the Five Elders just going to continue doodling penises on their paperwork if they walk in? Probably not, especially Whitebeard. He's meant to be dead. They're more likely to make unfortunate use of their drizzling incontinence before commencing a fight battle that has the potential to destroy all of Marijois. So knowing only what we knew back then, it was so hard to justify why Shanks was here and why the Five Elders were so comfortable with him and so dismissive of him. And so the conclusion was that Shanks could be working as a spy for the world government, whose mission was to something be a bit of a dick? I don't know. I heard it suggested a lot back in the day that he was a plant emperor, and I don't mean that like plant Admiral Ryokugyu. I mean that Shanks was intentionally elevated to that position in order to carry out strategic operations on behalf of the world government. Stuff like delaying Kaido and also magically showing up as soon as Blackbeard and the Impel Down prisoners rocked up, as well as being so civil with Sengoku negotiating the end of the war, many suspicions were had. Of course, other explanations were available, such as Shanks having been a former world noble who is still firmly good, but using his past connections to try and keep the world together just long enough for Luffy to become the Pirate King. But none of those explanations were anywhere near as exciting as the story equation that man with unknown motive plus man with connection to the world government equals very, very bad man. And to be fair to the equations, that maths wasn't wrong. It was just wrong to apply it to Shanks instead of Shamrock. But from this point on, it became headcanon in certain online circles that Shanks was acting as an informant to the Five Elders, a snitch, nay, a rat. And that idea was kept alive with the power of memes, probably the most iconic of which is the squeak panel, although I'm personally a big fan of any variation of I'm telling the Gorosei. But Shanks doing Odin's naked dance in the Room of Authority also got me good, and there were also quite a few depictions of Shanks' mythical rat Zoanfruit during Akad Island. In addition to the Five Elders, apparently we also got to see Shanks transform into a giant rat yokai. Not that that could ever reach the sheer dramatic lows of Shanks tearfully claiming, "I still have the Gorosei," nor the dramatic heights of "he snitched." Although in the hugest of twists, it turns out that Shanks was even present in Sanji's second flashback, snitching on Sanji to his father, Vinsmoke Judge. And Shanks even started to make guest appearances in other manga series like Jujutsu Kaisen. And don't forget the worldwide release of One Piece film Rat, or that time that Shanks came in Luffy's hat. From the moment that chapter 907 came out, Shanks became a bigger villain in the One Piece fanbase than most actual villains. And the Rat Shanks memes became even more prevalent than the Fraud Hawk memes, my favorite of which is this fan art of Mihawk painting his sword black because he doesn't have the skills to create a real black blade. But look, what chance did Fraud Hawk ever have, because you can't ignore the rat? And the end of Wano certainly did not help his case either, because right at the conclusion of that arc, we saw Shanks saying that it was time to find the One Piece, which conflicts somewhat with the goals of our protagonist, who needs to find the One Piece to become the Pirate King and then to do whatever his ultimate dream is. So this is the first actual case we have of Shanks actively standing in the way of Luffy, or at least appearing to. It looks like Evil Shanks or not, they are going to be sort of rivals in the final saga. But if you were a fan of Evil Shanks, then this could be taken as a pretty nefarious move, as if he'd almost spent the past 2 decades since Roger's death meticulously planning for this one moment that would allow him to claim the One Piece, potentially even knowing that this was the year when it can actually be used. Shanks was being treated as some sort of Blackbeard, a man who has actually been meticulously planning and plotting for decades. But the fact is that we are now over 1,100 100 chapters into the series, and we still have no idea what Shanks' goal even is, regardless of whether he's evil or whether he's not that. This was the height of Evil Shanks allegations. The circumstantial evidence was starting to swing heavily against him, and what it would take to stop a guilty verdict in the court of public opinion was the calling of a surprise witness. As on Elbaf, we were introduced to Shanks' twin brother Shamrock, and all of a sudden almost everything made sense, because at the very least chapter 907 now made sense, as that is almost certainly Shamrock in the room of authority with the 5 elders, not Shanks, and that was the main piece of substantive evidence against Shanks. And this was the perfect solution to that question, because fans now got the best of both worlds. For everyone who'd believed in Shanks all along, yes, he was a good man with probably good intentions, and for everyone who believed in Evil Shanks or Rat Shanks, we get one of those as well. Echiro Oda was feeling extra generous and bought in extra Shanks at the Shanks store for us to explore all of the ideas that Evil Shanks brought to the table. And as a result, in the fan base, none of these ideas have completely gone away. It's just that the heat has now shifted to Shamrock. In a thread titled Random Shanks Theory I Just Came Up With Cause I'm High, an alternate explanation was offered for the Roger Poison theory, stating, is this even the real Shanks? Just think about it. After the reveal of the God Knights with Garling and there being a possible cousin/brother around his age, brackets El Hermano, it gave me the sudden idea that our rat boy Shanks has a twin. But not just any twin, because the original Shanks was found by Roger. And if that Shanks has a twin that is trained to be a skilled fighter/hockeyman by Papa Garling and serving Emu to stop possible Joy Boy reincarnations from clapping Lily's cheeks once again. Oh, I forgot he wrote that. Then I am convinced that the Shanks that cried to Roger was not the Shanks Roger found, but a twin sent by the Gorosei Emu to replace the original Shanks and poison assassinate Roger. So interestingly enough, this thread actually predates the revelation of Shamrock, so it was pretty smack bang on with the twin idea. You've got to give this wildly high Redditor that much credit. But this idea now gets infinitely more complicated by stating that at some point Child Shanks was swapped with Child Shamrock, who impersonated Shanks and poisoned Roger, resulting in his incurable condition. Yes, it is far-fetched, yes, it is ridiculous, and yes, it is smack bang in the same sort of absurd spirit that Rat Shanks theory has always inhabited. So now I would just like to offer my congratulations to Mr. Shanks for being exonerated after 28 years of intense suspicion. It's been a very long and very public trial, but I'm glad that this case is finally closed.